You are about to receive messages that may be harmful to your mental state. Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the Meta. The Meta controls everything. The Meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching the Meta Show.
We're live! Yay!
We are live! Wow, look at that. We're here, we're back, and I'm delighted to say that, thank God, Boat is running and hosting the show, such that I'm not nearly as good as hosting as Boat is, so it's good to have you back, dude.
Yes! Hi. It's great to be back.
He's, like, furiously fixing a nameplate for Apple Pear here.
Oh,
so
it's fixed. We're good, now we're live.
Oh, look at this. So we've got an interesting setup here. Winners of the Eastern War, winners of the Northern War. I guess I should warn everybody that we might have almost toxic levels of smug. And a huge shout-out right now here for Xandril, who has hit the 24-month, 2 years mark. Wow, that is huge.
Starskill hits so 23. Much. 1 month to go. Yay. Also,
almost there. Yeah, thank you, guys.
Also, Mitch, did you see our title today?
I haven't yet. It is The Meta Show brings you the award-winning Fleet Commanders. I see. That's fantastic.
Sorry, I figured it'd all go together really well.
Yeah. So I just want to thank our guests also for being here on short notice. I know that Villy and Progod both have some interesting news that we'll be talking about as our top story here, which will be talking about Legacy and Winter Coalition reaching a peace deal.
Another 24 months.
Like, just happened, right? Like, oh wow, Mad Viking 9000, another 24 month. Wow, that is huge. Winning the North. Hashtag.
Yeah. So yeah, we managed to bring you the best of the best, and this is going to be great.
Okay. So you know, as guests here, we have Apple Pear, who is a fleet commander for Goonstorm. We also have Jay Amazingness, who of course you all know as our lead Super Cap FC and most amazing of all people. Pro God Legend FC from Test, as well as Villy in Test leadership. So it should be an interesting show.
Pro God swaps corps on a daily basis. Legend.
What do we want to start out with first here?
We're gonna press this button, and then we're gonna start.
Okay.
Because I like fancy buttons.
That's what she said.
There we go! I pressed button.
So you did.
So, yeah.
So I guess the top story, we have two top stories today, really, that we've got on our roster here. We have the biggest news is, from an Imperium perspective, the biggest news is going to be our victories in the North. We had, what, 4 Keep Stars killed? 4 Keep Stars, not 5. 4.
Well,
4
it was
lights.
technically like 10, but whatever.
DO6H, C4C, 3B8 and 7X, 10 Fortizars through Fade, a Sotio and X5 Faction Fortizar, all of this crazy shit, and then there was just this complete shit show regarding the leak of a secret tribute deal.
There was also
actually
there technically was a 5th, but it was down in the east. We went down there and helped kill it with Tess that morning.
That's all right, the FRT one.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to bring in Jay Amazingness for this one to sort of give. Jay was, you know, in the trenches during this huge day of killing and blowing things up. Jay, can you just tell us a little bit about what happened and what your perspective was?
Well, I actually went to bed at a reasonable time the night before. Went to bed at like 10 p.m., which is weird because I only got to bed at like 8 a.m. So went to bed at like 10 p.m. and woke up at like 4 or 5. And then I started running fleets. First fleet, me and Asher did together. Asher was still awake. But there wasn't much resistance. We didn't see any hostile form-ups. I think there was, like 6-7 people that showed up for it from the hostiles, and they either didn't engage us at all, or they just hauled on the Keepstar, which was a little bit disappointing since our numbers weren't exactly great at that time. They could have easily capitalized on it, especially if they'd have if they would have pinged for it like we have been. If they would have hyped it up, they could have capitalized on it. But after the first timer, we had the problem of doing 2 keep stars at once. So we had DO6 to do, and then 10 minutes later we had 3v8 to do. So we put Supers and Titans on one, and let everyone get Horde on the DO6 one, because that was the one we wanted to kill. That's the one everyone wanted to get on. And then we just had carriers pause the 3v8 one. Again, no resistance from the hostiles. DO6 saw about 30-40 people show up for it. From the hostiles, but they didn't engage. I think they tried to kill a few fighters, and they just didn't engage. So, again, disappointing. And then C4C was late that night, along with all the Fortizars and the Sotio. No resistance. I was really disappointed they didn't show up, because I was like, after the 2 timers in DO6 and 3v8, I got a little bit careless with managing like people that were DC'd. I didn't like probe them and like wait on them until they log back in. So I just left them there in C4C. Like, people were DC'd for like 10-15 minutes. And they could have easily capitalized on that if they would have formed up, but thankfully for us, they didn't.
That is, I mean, what do you think that they could have done differently? Do you think that they just gave up because of the deal that had been done, or what do you think was going through their head on this day?
Maybe they would have given up because of the deal, but also, like, I mean, NC Dot, they could have easily, red bombed a DC Titan and probably killed it, but they just didn't. Like, NC Dot wasn't the main focus of this deal, so. I mean, they could have easily have come over and, started harassing us and stuff. But GOTG, I think, GOTG is more broken, but yeah.
No,
I said they're all broken.
I think NC broke the most, because there was a chance to kill a bunch of our dreads in DO6 like a week ago as NC was evacing, and they literally did their move up in front of Horde fighting our dreads. It didn't even bother to warp over and get kills. They just jumped out and left, right? So they didn't want any more of it. That's just what it felt like. They just wanted out. Plus,
well, yeah, the way it's always worked historically in warfare is as soon as your enemy starts breaking and running, that's when they're the most vulnerable, right? When you're in a situation like now where they have effectively begun to break and are running, it changes from a battle to a rout, and that is why you see in wars like this so often that the majority of damage done is not done during the war. It's done in that last 10 or 20 days of a war, when your enemy breaks and you get free roll to destroy all of their infrastructure or their assets without, the same level of resistance that you're expecting.
Have you ever seen the movie, this might be a good analogy for this, the movie The Kingdom of Heaven, where he's got like a very tiny army defending Jerusalem, and he's like, we got to break them here. We got to stop them here so they come to terms, and we don't lose everybody. And I feel like that's what Sort did. Sort's plan was to pull back as slowly over time to get to a point where...
That is absolutely not what happened.
Where Declan would survive the war.
It's the weekly boat history.
No, I mean, the movie's not historically accurate, but that was what happened in the movie. But that's...
Yes, but in the movie that he put up a resounding defense first.
Well, they had a resounding defense. Look at X-47. They killed a lot of Titans.
I got nothing.
Those weren't
But Sort's been saying for a month now. Okay, so but even before this deal was reached, his whole plan was to burn us out before Deck, and then come to a deal, like reach a deal before we got into Declan and burnt Declan down, because Declan, that's everything of theirs. Like, that's all their Satios, their keep stars are all there for all the different alliances that are part of GOTG. All their assets are there. That was their hope, right? To burn us out before we get to Deck.
But could they use those Satios and keep stars, etc. then, since we were camping them all the time and burning them out? Like, he could try to burn us out, but I think they were burned out like a month ago already, pretty much. Seeing their fleet sizes and what they could do.
Yeah, the strategy you're suggesting implies a solid defense that does not waver until a deal is signed. Their defense had been wavering for almost a month, to the point you're suggesting.
Yeah, I mean, then there is this whole thing that I want to sort of bring up next before we move over to talking about the legacy deal. Is then there's been just this kind of catastrophic, hilarious mess of a secret treaty that was then leaked between Guardians of the Galaxy and the Imperium, which caused a lot of confusion. Understandably so, because we had our enemies wanted to do a secret deal to end the war and to basically buy us off. But the number one thing was that it was supposed to be a total secret. They wanted to not be made fun of on the meta show. They wanted to not need. They were afraid of, quote, bending the knee, unquote. And so this deal, as it was getting worked out, something that like our line members were never supposed to know about, and we were just going to move our SIGs and our squads away to attack other targets and redeploy as a result of this. And then after our enemies desperately wanted the deal to be hidden, they're the ones that leaked it, and so then there was just a tremendous amount of confusion.
Yeah, I've got a perfect image for this while you're doing this. So this is how I picture Riot Rick, or Sword Dragon looking at Riot Rick after he announced it, the leak.
Yeah, it's just been this weird thing, because like here's the thing about like a treaty. Secret treaties in EVE are pretty rare, but the nature of like a non-invasion pact or a structure treaty or something is usually that treaties are designed for line members to be able to see, right? Like, hey, you're not allowed to go cloaky camp over here, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this. And those agreements are designed for public clarity. And what's been curious about the mess about this treaty leaking is that it's a treaty that was designed for only like directors and autocrats to know about. So a lot of these provisions, like moving cloaky campers away or moving SIGs and squads to a different target, is something, that doesn't really apply to line members. Like, it was never intended to be like, yo, Jogoon newbie in your like little baby's first stealth bomber was never supposed to need to know about this. And so now the line was all confused about how all these are regulations and what are they supposed to do and all this other things.
I gotta wonder.
Completely supposed to be hidden.
And maybe Jay might know this, or you might know this, but I wonder if Riot Rick did this intentionally. Like, maybe he sees the writing on the wall that GOTG's fucked, and he wanted to make sure that NC... Because you always feel like with Riot Rick, he answers to Vince, not Sort, right? So it just feels like this leak was designed to make sure NC not knew about it.
Well, he didn't leak it. I mean, ultimately speaking, we traced the original person who leaked it. It was a director in Slice, and then once that director in Slice leaked it, Riot Rick went into damage control spin mode. So it wasn't Riot Rick, but basically some random dude, and our counterintelligence organization did some really good work. Some guy on Slice posted something on a Reddit account, on a throwaway Reddit account. But he had used, he actually had a Path of Exile character with the same name, so a little bit of Googling revealed he had a Path of Exile character with that name, which was then linked to an EVE character, and that's how...
Yeah, in Path of Exile you have like 10 characters, and one of his characters of the 10 on the account was his EVE character, and that led it to a Slice director, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that Riot Rick went into like, damage control mode. I don't think that he leaked it. But yeah, so I mean, it was this other Slice dude, and then Riot Rick had to roll with it, and blah blah blah. So,
well, either way, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's beneficial for anyone in GOTG to get this out there, right? Like, you make a deal that effectively fucks CO2 and NC and Horde. Right? It gets you out of the war, gets you safe for 6 months.
CO2 though. Didn't they like already kick them out of their space?
Well, yeah, they shot the CO2 keep stars. It was tough.
Which blows my fucking mind, by the way.
Like, tell us about this. Go ahead, ProGod.
I mean, like, I got what they were doing. They needed to blame their incompetency on somebody besides themselves, but to just sit there and throw CO2 under the bus and then claim that GigX, of all people, doesn't want to form for a fight. Just that leap of logic right there. How you can just sell that to your members, that GigX doesn't want to fight, and that's the reason you're not defending these timers? Like,
what did you think? And then I'm gonna ask you and Billy this. What did you think when Sword announced that what's his name? The GigX is refusing to talk to anyone in leadership, but at the same time, he was in communication with Horde and NC Dot to get moved to ODSV. Well, what did you think when you heard that out of Sword?
Must be that time of the month again.
GigX is a very predictable individual. As much as he's unpredictable in other things, he is very predictable in the way he's going to react to certain styles of leadership and certain personalities. If he doesn't view you as the strongest body in the room, he's generally not going to give you the credence to listen to you. And we certainly had our difficulties dealing with TGX over our time with him as an ally. And he can be extremely difficult to work with at times. It's just part of who he is. He's a great leader in other cases, but he certainly has difficulties when it comes to working on a team.
Yeah, and I think it's just kind of curious to see what's going to happen with CO2 now that GigX is like banned and then they've been sort of purged. We got some news that CO2 is moving to Malpay to try to like reconstruct themselves in Bumfuckistan in the drone region.
We got locators on them. They were located there, and they had a couple of their jump freighters killed by Skill U as they were moving in.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens. One of the things, of course, there was initially a lot of confusion about the treaty because it's like, okay, well, we're not going to be killing darkness anymore, but CO2 is not covered by that, and there's no reason why we can't be twisting the knife on them.
Oh, I'm so happy they're not in that because I have a big hate boner for CO2. So as long as we get to shoot CO2, I'm happy.
CO2 was very publicly, I don't know what the word would be, let down by this. But they posted on Reddit how it's not fair. That their members basically realized that they were just the meat shield, and now the GOTG are actually in danger. Now that the GOTG realize they're in danger, they're just going to pay goons off. So
Yeah,
a lot of CO2 members are not happy about Sort's decision.
Were they shocked to find out Gobbins just wasn't the nicest person in the world, giving them a free region?
Yeah.
Freaking Gobbins, I swear.
What's interesting though is, okay, so we're about to get to the reason our wonderful guests Billy and Pergo are here, but I'm gonna get Apple Pear's perspective. What happens now? PL just reset GO2G. They reset everyone but NC Dot. That happened this week. Pandemic Horde was not too happy. I mean, they broadcasted several times, this agreement doesn't apply to us. We don't give a fuck about it. We're not any part of it. And a couple of CO2 members that are like leaders in the CO2 were like, look, this is a forever war. Fuck you, GOTG. You threw us under the bus. You're dead. There was a great Reddit post on that. They got like 1,000 comments. What happens now with GOTG? I mean, they're safe from us, but are they safe from their own backyard?
That's a big worry. That's Shot Dragon always said on the TSIS, like AAM he did, or like talk he did there, that he was worried that they might come for him, like NC and all their friends. Yeah.
I think
I
that's
wouldn't
very
mind.
likely.
I wouldn't mind that
likely.
happening.
You say it's likely. Oh gosh, tell us why.
I mean, the last time NC or PL had any success, they were picking on Providence of all people. I mean, who else are they to shoot to get some momentum back going?
I literally said this morning, that this is PL's opportunity to have somewhat the bully, right? GO2G is really fucking weak, just to go by the numbers here. They've dropped 5,500 members out of like the 12,000 they had, and since the war started. There's a nice little chart of them collapsing. Their economy was dead, thanks to the services of a few guys AFK with cloaks. So this gives PL an opportunity to go beat up someone weak.
Declan and Branch make fantastic renter regions if you already own Tribute Valentino. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, and look, we can't touch the region for 6 months, so it's a great place to install renters.
We cannot touch it, I think, unless as long as GOTG is there.
Oh.
I hope that's like. So if they
Yeah, I mean, if
kill us-
Guardians of the Galaxy is purged from that region, then our deal is with Guardians of the Galaxy, and so that wouldn't really apply. Like, if PL and NC Dot kick them out of the north, then there's nothing stopping us from then just purging PL and NC Dot.
Right, but I mean...
Just a question. Who is Guardians of the Galaxy? Is this not Dead Collision we're talking about, or...?
Dead Coalition, whatever the fuck they call themselves, yeah.
Sorry, Billy, we're not as correct on our alliance.
Gotta be politically correct, folks.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
If they want to, be known as dead.
I mean,
hunting there is pretty sweet, so let's hope they kill them, and then we can just go back up north there and back to Roar, and we can hunt the renters they put there and get nice Rorqual kills again. That looks.
And there's also nothing stopping us from getting Rorquals. Like, that's another thing about this. Like, moving SIGs and squads away doesn't mean that, like, you can't just have random goods running around with fleets, like, blowing up Rorquals. It's
great
just, like,
thing we have a great wormhole SIG, isn't it?
It is true that we have a great wormhole SIG.
Yeah, we have one called Whalers that are really good. But we're about to move on. But one other thing, right as we were about to leave, Mittens, I don't know if this stat was broadcasted, We had moved into branch with NGSA. We were there 2 weeks, and ratting production fell 60% in a 24-hour period, from about 500,000 a day to under 200,000.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out here. NGSA and the NGSA program has been incredibly useful, and it's something that I think people had a reasonable fear when the treaty came out that like we were going to stop doing it, and that's not the case. Like there are other targets that we're going to be going after. One of the reasons why we've pulled back from this thing is that Dead Coalition, Guardians of the Galaxy, whatever you want to call them, has kind of like rolled over, pissed themselves, and begged for mercy, and that there are still, as far as I'm concerned, there's still a lot of casino war criminals out there that haven't been punished appropriately. So. We're just going to keep punching downward. It's that like these guys have been beaten into submission and are giving us 40 faction Fortizars, so it's time to move on to beat on somebody else.
Oh, apparently a ratty Nyx just died from Horde this morning.
By the way, I love that punching downwards messaging that you kept doing during the fireside. That stuff's great.
I mean, it's basically true. Like one of the things that's really interesting about this, from a meta perspective, or I guess a strategic perspective, is like we now have like a model for a new type of war. I've never been involved in a war in EVE which was truly not territorial. The closest thing to what we've pulled off here collectively, when I say us pulling off collectively, I include a Legacy Coalition along with the Imperium, because this is really like a group effort on two different sides of the galaxy. Is here we have a different type of war. It's not about conquest. It's about running up the score and just increasing the economic differential between us and the bad guys. So that is the punching downward thing. And so now we have this model for a new kind of war that doesn't require us to take territory. And I am very, I want people to understand, like, I despise peace. Right, we need a little bit of time to like rest and rearm and things like that. But with this new model that has been created, I think it's going to be fun to take it on the road and see how it works on the next target.
Yeah, so I want to get to
interesting that you can actually do a max damage campaign now with the current mechanics.
Yeah, that's basically this is essentially the Band of Brothers tried to do a max damage campaign against the Northern Coalition, the original one, in I think like 2007 thereabouts, 2005. I forget the date.
It was 2007 for the first one, and then 2009 for the second one. There was a second one that they did.
And yeah, they just failed horribly at it. Like they just didn't really do it. And we actually have the capability to go through there because Citadels exist now, right? You couldn't really do like a campaign like that back in the day, simply because people could just hold. I'm just not going to undock this in my conquerable station, and maybe I'll lose it or whatever. But like the assets wouldn't really be destroyed. You could only conquer back in the day, and now the mechanics have changed such that you actually have the ability to just do pure damage and still have it make a military difference.
Someone made this comment, I can't remember who it was, it might have been Kid Color, that with the new game mechanic with moon mining, you could effectively put someone back in the Stone Age. You could reset them to patch day, because it takes 74 days for a max frac. So if you wipe out every single Athenor in a region, all of those moons have to spool up for 2.5 months to get back to the point where they can start making money. And that's the first frac. That gives you another 2 months to come back, kill them all again, and reset them all again. Like, there's no way to make moon money if you wipe a region. Like, if you just purge a region, like burn a region to the ground. Okay, someone says 70 days. But wait, not 70? I thought it was 74 for max frac. Oh, whatever. Anyway, the point is, it still wipes a region out. Like, Fade and Pureblind are now dead zones. You cannot moonmine there until someone moves in, sets it up, takes a long time, does a lot of effort, and then there's still that fear that someone could come in and wipe them out again. Okay, 56 days. But either way, it's 56 days is a long fucking time in EVE, right? Especially with the Delta Time Unit making, what, $1 billion a day? Just in each system? It's crazy.
It's pretty ridiculous. I'm really happy with it. I mean, again, like something that we talked about before, during the course of this war, we expected that we would blow up, like we were going to call it after DO6. Actually, we were going to call it after DW. We were going to call it after 5 Cube Stars. And then, all told, we've ended up blowing up 10 Cube Stars, stealing 1, and then having 2 relocated when we asked nicely. So, but speaking of deals, I think it's a good opportunity for us to flip over to talk about what's new in Legacy Land and this deal that just happened.
Really? All right. So yeah, basically, after the people who came down to sponsor Fraternity and Triumvir's war left them to die, it was only a matter of time until this is bound to happen. The decision for us was basically, do we want to wipe out Fraternity, or do we want to keep them around as a source of constant content? We've been kind of slow burning, taking Amencia and Teniferous, which they had encroached upon. They had encroached in those regions while PL and Skill-U and all the Eastern forces were down here. And as we were getting closer and closer to their border, I think it finally hit them that there was really nothing they could do to keep us from going on unless they paid us off. So they reached out earlier this week to pay us off.
Now, when you say paying you guys off, is it public what the payoff was? I might have just.
Well, we can say it wasn't faction Fortizars, which we were kind of shocked when you guys got paid in faction Fortizars, but it's easy for us to forget that not everyone had a region full of PL faction Fortizars to harvest. So, you know, it's you got to put things in perspective there.
Okay, it was new for us. I mean, I know you guys have. I mean, how many faction Fortizars did you guys get out of?
Just under 100.
Jesus Christ!
From PL, just there was 80 in Providence.
Yeah, we're just trying to play catch up to you guys. You know, we're like, man,
no, it's
like,
understandable entirely.
But yeah, if you could share the agreement, I mean, we got this on the Reddit here. I linked it in the thing.
The agreement's public, basically public. We put it on our forum, so I'm sure it's been copy pasted to Reddit within minutes.
It's just a lot of words. But
the exact financial figure is private, and if Norris wants to say that publicly, then he's free to do so. But that's not for us to.
Wait, how can he say that if he's banned though? Didn't he get banned for RMT recently?
His wife.
Yeah.
Oh, his wife's played. Okay. We understand that then. We completely understand what GigX's 8th character he's on. Oh, that's cool though. So you guys got 6 months. Pretty much the same deal we got in the North, right? It says 6 months here.
So basically, yeah, we're in a position where we're not going to. We've basically given them a nip for 6 months, where they'll be covered solve structures, close to camping, and they'll be free to do whatever. They'll roam us, we'll roam them, but it will be a cease it, an end of territorial aggression.
I think it's interesting that there's kind of a symmetry in this war on both halves of the galaxy here, where it ends within just a matter of a week with both the Imperium and Legacy getting favorable tribute-oriented deals from the primary hostiles.
Also,
well, I think it's funny. I think it's a component of the way the meta works now.
Tell us about it, Billy.
Wait, what happened?
So, there's no reason, like, as you just, highlighted in the way the Max campaign worked, there's no reason for us to stop unless they give us a reason to stop. We can just keep going and burning Fortizars and Keepstars and Sotios. Like, we had reinforced a Sotio, what did you do last night, ProGod? And I think that was kind of the trigger mechanism.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the straw that broke the camel's back. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to start losing Sotios with Titans in build. This is bad. We need to, make this stop. And Norris is, as much as, we've criticized him for the decisions he's made historically and whatever else you want to say about him, he's there to protect his guys, right? Those are his members. Those are the, people that trust him, and he's trying to do what he can to protect them. And I think it became very apparent in the course of last week when we killed their Keepstar, put their entire staging system into second reinforce, so they have no clone bay in their staging system, then killed a bunch of Titans doing so, and killed another Titan, on a random Rorqual attack. When we're dumping 100-man Nightmare Fleets in their space to kill their Rorquals, which is hard to defend, to say the least, even in their prime time. It triggered in his mind. It's like, I can't protect my guys from this, and I need to do something. And the only way to do that in the current meta is to make them stop somehow.
I have a question about what happened this week. I think it was ProGod's fleet. It happened in RU TAC 9.
Oh my god.
RU TAC P. Is it? So I heard a rumor that you guys were on a gate and they warped like 50 AU from a Fortizar.
It's so much worse.
Oh, please tell us. We didn't hear about this. Tell us.
Those that know, 2 Titans died.
We went to reinforce their iHub. And about an hour before that, NoRouse had pinged out his guys like, Tester about to form, please don't feed, Dr. Rorqual's up, etc. And then they realized that we were reinforcing their staging hub, and they're like, holy shit, we need to form, let's get formed. And so I'm sitting there with my Nightmare Fleet at 0, and one of our they have 2 forts in system, one that we're right on top of with the iHub, another one like 30 AU away. And they're about to bridge their battleship fleet in. And our scout sees 2 Titans log on to their other Fortizar. It's 30 AU away. And he's like, hey, it's just 2 Titans. Hey, they're aligning to the iHub. And I'm like, they're aligning? All right, let me know when they warp. And he's like, all right, they warp. And I'm like, well, I guess I better move. And I just fleet warp up to a ping spot, and they land right in the middle of where we were, and we warp Dictors in and drop like 30 dreads on them. And then we kill the 2 Titans. They bring some dreads in. Server goes down, because this is like 13 minutes before downtime. Server comes back online, and we assume they're not going to log on, because we've seen this happen 3 or 4 times now, where the server goes down and the people we're fighting against just choose not to fight anymore. But they start logging more caps back in. And I had already jumped all our caps out as soon as the server came back on, but they didn't have enough caps to really do anything, and they didn't really have enough Tempest to kill us. So we're just killing caps with our Nightmares. And we kind of let 1 or 2 of our faxes die, and they, you know, bait tank a little bit. They start jumping more dreads in. We jump our caps back in, kill their whole Tempest fleet, issue fleet, and the rest of their caps. And then they go reship in the Eagles, come back in an Eagle fleet. We warp on top of that with all of our caps and subcaps, kill about half those Eagles, and point their FC with who's in a monitor. They warp their Eagle fleet off, what's left of it, like 40 Eagles. But then because the FC's tackled, he warps his Eagle fleet back, kills everything that's tackling his monitor, and warps his monitor away, but leaves most of his Eagle fleet to die. And by then, like, we were trying to reinforce 2 iHubs, but by then the second iHub's vuln window was closed, because it took like 3 hours to kill all these fleets that kept feeding us. So it was a shit show. It was pretty crazy.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Shit shows are the best. They are the best.
I don't know what to say to that.
I mean,
I mean they are. When the enemy is a complete mess, like if it used to be like certain FCs, you wouldn't kill them. You would tackle them with like 20 tacklers, hold him there, and wipe out the whole fleet, because that FC wouldn't warp off unless he'd get himself off, right? He wouldn't warp his fleet out. So you could wipe out his whole fleet, and he'd be the last one staying. GigX used to be like this. So that's when you call it a shit show, because the guy knows he's going to lose the fight. He should get what he has alive out, but he just stays because he's afraid to lose his own ship.
Well, I was pretty shocked that he warped his fleet back just to get his own ship out. It's pretty low. But I don't know. I mean, this was happening before PL and all of them came down to Fraternity space. Before this whole war broke out in the East, you know, Test was fighting Fraternity and Triumvirate pretty regularly, and it was, you know, casual border skirmishes. And Fraternity they try hard and they're learning, but they're still, you know, relatively inexperienced. So the fact that we signed a peace treaty with them is, I mean, it's not that we couldn't kill them. We'd just be killing our own content there. I think the bigger story is definitely what happened in the North. I mean, the whole Northern War in general.
I am curious about that, like, because, you know, we've been on different sides of all this, sort of galactically, one side, west versus east, I guess, or the western corridor, the eastern corridor. You know, what's your take on what's gone down from a legacy perspective with the darkness thing, and you know, I'm just curious about your perspective on the war. As far as like our side of the war, or my opinion on your side of the war? Your opinion on our side of the war is what you were sort of about to get into.
I think it's pretty mind blowing that it got to that point. I mean, this is something that Asher and Villy and I were talking about in our little shared FC channel, that I'm actually the only FC who's fought multiple wars with the NCPL side. And seeing them break apart from this side in the same way that plenty of our wars broke apart in the past kind of pisses me off a little bit, because I realize, you know, how frustrating those previous wars were. The Fountain War comes to mind, things of that nature. But it's to see them, you know, refuse to pick a leader, refuse to pick a singular war plan again, you know, for what, like the 10th time, Matani, that you guys have fought them in the same way?
Yeah.
Like, refuse to communicate properly with their members and set reasonable expectations in the narrative. You know, and as soon as things go wrong, point fingers, and then, you know, put all the blame on whichever shitty alliance is the scapegoat that time, this time LCO2. Like, it's mind-blowing that they're still doing the same thing.
That is one of the things that is really curious about this, like the fact that there is still no united chain of command amongst the hostiles, and it seems like
it's going to get worse now.
It seems like in all these wars, it's just an opportunity for them. Like by not having a united chain of command, there's always somebody that they can blame for what goes on. I mean, when things go well for the Imperium, it's like we get to have lots of credit all the way around or whatever. But when things go ultimately, like when things go pear-shaped, it's my fault, right? Like that's the burden of being on top of the chain of command. Is like no matter what happens, it's your fault.
Even when things go right, you tend to get yelled at for it by somebody, right?
Oh
like,
yeah.
Even if things are in the best interest of the whole.
Yeah, I mean, but that's one of the strange things is that like throughout the history of EVE Online, like this is hardly unique to the Imperium. Like most entities and most coalitions have a person where the buck stops with them. I mean, that's why we have the term autocrats in EVE. And it is just really unusual that in war after war, NC and PL has always been very loud about the fact that they have their like FC anarchy and like no one person is in charge and it's just the campaign commanders, so they can always like dodge prosperity. And I think that you really see in a defensive war like what they just went through, the limitations of that kind of thing.
Here's a question I have for Progon and Villy. Now that it's come out publicly that the leader of FRT was spending upwards of 60 grand to fund his alliance's SRP, to fund Dreads and Carriers and Titans and all this stuff, would the war been as difficult for you guys with FRT if he wasn't doing that?
No.
A lot of the enemies aligned against us were paid in some way, shape, or form by No Rouse. There's a very expensive contract for an entire Cloaky Camp Bombers Bar group, or a guy who usually runs with Bombers Bar, Cloaky Camping Esoteria. I think
it's like $100 bill, right?
Like $100 bill a month. Like
yeah.
It's insane. I wouldn't pay that much for Cloaky Campers. But
I wouldn't pay that much for Bombers Bar. Cloaky Campers are not.
Yeah, Black Legion's SRP was fully funded by No Rouse. No Rouse was constantly handing out Macarial fleets to NC Dot and Horde for every major timer.
Yeah.
All kinds of things like that. It wasn't nearly as bad as the previous war with multiple names.
The Casino War, has it?
Yeah, the Casino War. Yeah. You go ahead and tell us.
But it was a similar situation.
Yeah, to give you an idea, I think we were far more effective with NGSA than Bombers Bar, and it cost us $16 billion for 3.5 months. So, the fact that he was paid $100 bill a month for them to do almost nothing, because they really didn't kill much in your guys' space. I mean, they killed a Oracle here and there, but that's not enough, as we've learned in Delve, to stop the train of production. Right? It doesn't slow down because you lose one Oracle when you have 400 of them.
Yeah, but the one thing with NGSA is also, like, people like to do it. They have result. It gives them some goal for the lines. They're helping the lines. They see what the effect is on our enemy. They don't like the enemy. So they don't do it for the money. They do it for the paps and for
volunteer armies are always better than mercenaries.
Right. It's actually been a major talking point inside Bombers Bar. A little segue here. They're having a struggle internally with the whole idea of people are wondering why. Like, they're asking their leaders pretty much every op, because what they do is they roll wormholes to go to a certain part of space and kill things. But every time they get a wormhole in the north, they roll away from it. And they're like, oh, there's no content here, even though, PL may have Oracles out or Horde. They're like, oh, there's no content here, let's roll away from this, it's boring. And then people are finding out they're rolling away from the north and are asking questions like, are we truly NPSI? Because that's their claim, right? Like, you can join us and we'll shoot everybody. And they're really struggling.
I've been on Bombers Bar fleets over the last, 2 weeks or so. I've been helping out some Black Hand people on there, and I was on a fleet the other day, and it was a 4.5 hour fleet, and we didn't leave the wormhole at all. We rolled the wormhole multiple times, and every time it went to Brothers of Tangris space or Skill Yourself space or Tino or whatever, and we just didn't get anything. Like, the fleet went nowhere.
No, so the Northern Forces made good relationship with the people who run Bombers Bar at the beginning of the war.
Marshy and Templeman.
Templeman is really in with the NC Intel people, and I imagine that they just got some kind of deal.
Templeman is he's actually in Slice. One of his characters is in Slice. He works with Right Rick. So we kind of know this. It's funny because Bombers Bar, one of the guys, not those two, asked me to join NGSA because he wanted to get the intel to roll holes into the north and shoot the north. So we made a fake channel that only sent information that I sent. And so every time they would get a bit of information, I'd make it ping him. And in 3 months, he never replied once. So I don't think he realized it was fake.
I want to move on here, so a couple of things.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, we're in Cool Kids Only mode, so this is an opportunity for people who subscribe to the channel and supported us to ask questions to our guests. And we're going to touch on questions as we get them, or you guys can just shut up chat and enjoy having emotes. But there's also been a major change in the game. We've had the October balance pass has been
I gotta
released.
press this button. Hold on.
And yeah, Bo's going to press the button.
And then I'll have a link.
Does it make sound? That's not. I could do like some sort of like.
It should have sound, but the sound sometimes breaks on OBS. It's been a work in progress. But yeah, it's supposed to have a fancy sound like that. You're right. But anyways, go ahead, Mittens. October patch.
Okay, so the October balance patch. I mean, suddenly there's CSM comes back, and suddenly there's all these changes. Probably like I'm actually going to throw this over to some of our more elite PvPers, because you guys know me. I'm a metagame person. I'm not too much of a flyer. But, I mean, holy shit, this ECM change, right? Like, for people who are unaware, ECM is basically turned into a taunt. If you're jamming someone, they won't be able to target anybody else, but they will be able to shoot you back. So, back from the days when I first started playing EVE, solo PvPers would complain about, well, because of Falcon. And now we're in a scenario where the era of because of Falcon appears to be over. So, I mean, I don't know who wants to take this one first. But what do you guys, FCs, think about this?
The 3 changes are big. So I'll do a quick overview of all 3 and why I think they're massive. Who said FCs?
I'd like to. I just like to talk about the ECM thing first.
Oh, it's good for 1v1, right? Because there's situations where, like, you have this really badass 10 billionist Tengu, and I've done this before, where you go in, all of a sudden, you go from fighting 1v1 to fighting 1v3, and you've got a Falcon there jamming you, and you've got a Rapier, and you either have to warp out and get away, or die, right? You're fucked. But now with this, you're damn well going to kill the Falcon. Like, the Falcon just melts. People are going to have to really put tanks on their Falcons.
Unless the Falcon's at range.
Or... I don't know. To me, it just means you need to... I think of everything in terms of fleet fights. Like, you just need to have your logistics organized properly with your ECM watch listed, and your ECM ships need to have enough tank to survive a volley. The biggest change to me is that fighters from carriers can now lock what's jamming them, which means you can't just throw untanked Griffins at the field. They need to...
Oh, that's a really good point.
It's actually super massive for trying to kill super carriers, because, like, previously a single Falcon could basically... perma-jam a super carrier's worth of fighters, right? And he has no way to defend himself when he's under attack by, let's say, 80 bombers. And I actually think this is a negative, to be honest.
Because it's a negative, too.
The solution to that would be to, like, jump in like a Widow, right? Like, jump MJD and then jam at range.
Well, Widow doesn't have that level of range.
Well, and that's the thing here, is you're seeing bomber groups that would bring Falcons specifically to kill super carriers, because the Falcons would jam the fighters. But now that your fighters can shoot those... Falcons, there's the chance that they might get away now, that they can fight back. And
well, you got to make sure you have enough tanks. So I mean, as long as you got enough tank and you got logistics, and it's just annoying. Like I don't think it's gonna be that big.
But the problem is there's no way to really do that though. Like
this
long-range fighter bombers, basically like volley stealth bombers.
Yeah, this feels like it's a counter to bomber spark play.
Afterburner, our Kitsune fit could be refit with an afterburner and tank pretty much everything that fighters or fighter bombers could do.
I don't know, man. Those long-range fighter bombers, especially when they're like ratting tracking fits, are like insane.
It's no. I mean, it's not great. Don't get me wrong. It's not great, but
it's gonna affect mega fights.
But like that's the thing. Kitsune doesn't jump in on a Sino beacon either, right? So.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't think it's definitely gonna hurt Rorqual hunters, which I don't think anyone, thought that people defending Rorquals needed a buff.
Why? Spell that out for me, because I'm slow and barely play EVE. So how is this going? How is the ECM change going to buff Rorqual Hunter?
Every time that you take capital ships and make it harder for subcaps to deal with everything that a capital ship can throw at them, you're raising the barrier of entry to actually be threatening to a Rorqual. As you know, like you can tank 50k DPS with the Rorqual. If I see 15, like a 20-man gang, I don't necessarily even have to panic. Things of that nature. So now, if I can jump in, if I'm being tackled by like 20 dudes, and I see 3 Falcons. That used to be a big deal, but now I can jump in a couple super carriers, know that those Falcons won't even matter. It makes it easier for people to respond. It's less effort on the people responding to the Warkle being tackled, and it requires more effort, which raises the barrier of entry for people trying to kill Warkles. It makes it harder.
Well, to be honest, it basically
basically
makes it so that super carriers are basically immune to stealth bomber gangs.
Yeah, and not just super carriers. I saw this as a way for like Hodreds. Like if you drop 5 Hodreds and you got enough Falcons, you can jam a Hodred. They can still chance based, and it's a very low chance. But if you jam a Dread, it takes another 30 seconds for the gem to break, 30 seconds for him to relock. That Hodred gets really fucked, right? But now that Hodred can just blow up the Falcon. He doesn't lose his lock on that Falcon. He could blow up the Falcon, right? And that's
generally the Falcons are going to be at range unless the Hodred has Scorch and.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like a Revelation is going to be able to fight against Hodred. So again, if you have a Warkle tackled, right, you just drop a couple carriers or even a Hodred or 2 and shoot the Falcons. The Falcons all evaporate, right? Now you've got nothing to jam anything, and I think it's a target. It's a target at groups that do Black Ops drops. Is how I see this, right? Groups that do no Logi drops.
It's gonna push people into just doing, you know, mass bomber fleets. Like the people actually coming with the people who fuck up the lot is like people like Bombers Bar who just do, you know, mass stealth bomber fleets with, you know, a few key people in Falcon roles. It's gonna push people into doing, you know, logis and stuff.
So we got to smart about more bombers.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think they keep moving things in a direction away from small, medium game roaming content, which is good because you need that daily content so that you don't have to constantly go to war to create content. Because as we've just seen, wars burn out FCs because they're really hard to manage. It's easier for everyone if there's a lot of casual daily content in between these wars. But they just keep raising the minimum requirement for daily content. Like you need to bring a bare minimum amount of DPS to break a Warkle, or you're just wasting your time. And the more they keep doing these changes, the harder and harder they make it for daily casual content.
ProGod, you might like this, and maybe even Billy. You guys do the Alliance tournament. Same with Apple Pair, I think, and Jay. I think that this feels like a changed design for the Alliance tournament because jamming was a big issue last Alliance tournament. So they're trying to make a change for these small 10-on-10 fights. These small Alliance tournament change.
Came straight out of the Alliance tournament.
Right, and then they don't think about the big deal. Yeah, they don't think about what it affects.
I read this balance change, and I thought it came out of nowhere. I was like, who's complaining about ECM right now? Like, no major alliance is using ECM in any threatening way. I just
That's
don't
true.
know
It's
where
not
it came
part of
from
any
out
fleet
the Alliance
meta.
tournament.
Yeah, and it's
literally the only time
huge.
Literally the only time that ECM matters is like the sub 10-man gangs at the Alliance tournament.
Yep.
And like the Alliance tournament should never be a balancing factor in any way. So,
but it does feel like they do that sometimes. Like maybe every once you'll see this about right after the Alliance tournament. They'll come out with some little change that they think only affects the Alliance tournament, and then Fozzie goes, "Oh shit, that just made Titans so much better, or that made big fleet fights so much better for the one side over the other." They don't think about the big fights.
I'm going to jump in here and use the mention of Fozzie to segue to a next major thing I want us to talk about before we call it a day. In the October Balance Pass, which is pretty massive here, nullification changes. We have had a plague of Fozzie claws, which are, of course, all claws used to be interdiction nullified and used artillery to basically just alpha anything and zoom in, zoom out, and they'd be uncatchable. And so now the fleet interceptors are the Claw, the Crusader, the Raptor, and the Ares are having their nullification completely removed because insta-warping, nullifying scepters, harassing people are dumb as hell. And I just wanted to throw that out there to see, are we going to see any changes in the meta? Is everybody just going to shift to using Fozzie stilettos instead? What do you guys think about this?
Maledictions.
Terrible change. Doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't really accomplish anything, and it takes away the only thing that interceptors are even worth fielding for. Interceptors, like, if they don't have nullification, they will never be fielded. The power creep in the frigate meta is so large that there are very few interceptors that are even viable right now, sans the nullification. So, like,
I think it moves everyone to maledictions. We've seen there was a guy in Test Alliance named Sumatra, I think.
Yeah, Sumatra. Yeah.
He would use 4 maledictions to hunt VNIs because maledictions you would do so much damage really quickly and you would get out. He wouldn't even stay on grid very long. He could use light missiles. They have a long
This is
range.
actually post or there's been a change to maledictions since then. But yeah, like maledictions are still.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone really cares that interceptors are insta-warping through gate camps. I mean, the claw fleets that would warp on field and insta-volley something and then warp out immediately are kind of shitty. The ECM bursting scepters definitely needed to be fixed, but like, I don't know.
This doesn't even fix that.
No, this doesn't. This doesn't solve that
fix it
problem
at all. That's why I think this change is so stupid. Like the only really true broken things with interceptors is the ECM bursting scepter, and this doesn't even address that. So
For
Yeah,
those
like maybe
watching
you
the
could
show-
like chunk the claw for like 5% more damage or something like.
So
but-
this is another thing where I'm like, where is this
Yeah.
coming from, and you know what is this solving? It's I don't know.
So for those that don't
since
understand,
since the
ECM
Entosis changes, where they allowed you to remote rep people Entosising and nerfed claws buff from damage to ROF, for the most part, it's like it hasn't been that bad at all. Like
It does seem like they're like
You know
closing
how
the
they could solve it?
barn door
It's-
after the horses left.
They
Yeah.
could solve it by, if they really want to get rid of insta-warping scepters and still maintain their agility, then they just increase their base align time, and then give them some kind of bonus that reduces the mass increase from the MWD, so that they
Right.
keep the same agility when the MWD turns on.
Yeah, so the agility stays the same, but they don't instant warp. Because you can make
Which
them
I saw
warp at
that
three
suggested all over the
seconds.
threads, so-
Yeah, you can make them warp at 3 seconds. They're catchable, but that 3 seconds isn't going to affect micro warp driving that much. I think it just meant more effort, right?
Well, the big issue is interdiction nullification. That's the
Yeah.
huge thing, right?
Yeah, that's not a bad thing, though. I thought that was, when they made interceptors nullified, I thought that was one of the best changes they'd made in a while.
I think T3s need to be
I
looked
don't
at,
think
though.
so.
Apple, what do you think?
Yeah, please,
Yeah,
Apple.
get in here.
One thing I hope from it is that people stop bringing interceptors to my fleet and bring assault frigates to tackle things. But for the rest, I'm glad they're going to get rid of nullification. Hope to get rid of all scepters nullification. With the last change you saw with like defending against things, etc., we pretty much used only jackdaws because like scepters were not really needed for that anymore. And yeah, you saw enemy doing scepters, but it had less effect. My
the
feeling
Entosis,
good.
they're not as big of a deal in the Entosis war anymore.
Because everyone uses
Apple,
capitals.
you got to start banning interceptors in your fleet, man. I did it, and I'm so much happier.
Oh, I yell at people. I tell people who are in interceptors to go in vigils and like bring target painters with me instead of interceptors because they're more useful than that. But that be by the side. And yeah, the other sense, and that's a chicken and egg thing because on one hand it's hard to roam in space, etc., and get fights because you get carriers dropped on you all the time. But on the other hand, if people bring some more real roaming gangs, etc., you might get some decent fights out of that. Also, if on the edges of your space that you cannot always reach with capitals. That's on the other hand something I hope we get from it, but we have to see what happens. I think because they did only half of the scepters, they're just going to like switch to other types of scepters and just use that for those kind of things until they nerf all the nullification of all the scepters.
We got a big
We
one
have
here.
one more thing before we take off here. So guys, I have a Twilight Imperium game. I've got some friends coming over here shortly after the meta show, so unfortunately
You gotta go?
can't run long. But before I do, because we still have a couple minutes left, there is one pretty significant change here that was also released in the October balance
This is the
patch,
biggest change.
which is the we'll have a debate about that, which is the 500 M and Hicks are no more. Why is that the biggest change?
Because now a Hictor could throw his bubble up, go full speed, and keep up with an enemy fleet that's trying to escape. If you've got 5 Hictors and you don't want the enemy to warp out, in the past you had to time your bubbling to when they fleet warped and hope that they you stayed on top of them, and then you time your bubble and hopefully you catch some of them, right? But now you can literally go as fast as they are, as fast as your ship goes, micro warp driving with your bubble up. No worry in the world, unless they shoot you, obviously. But this is huge, like for fleets. Big fleet fights. And I don't think they were thinking about this when they changed this.
What do you guys think?
We'll see.
I mean, they definitely. I thought the PR behind how they talked about wormholes in the post was like, my jaw dropped when I saw that. They're like, "Yeah, we know we're screwing over wormholes. Sorry." I thought that was hilarious, but I mean, Hictors, they're so easy to kill. They're EHP, unless you're using a devoter, their EHP is just really bad. So I don't know. Maybe it matters, maybe it doesn't.
All right. Well, anything else before we call it a day?
Not much. Oh! Someone I've been PM'd several times by members of NGSA. NGSA wants to know if we can get one of those trophy faction Fortizars for our hard work.
We might very well be able to do that. We just have to actually have the bad guys come in and give them to us.
We just want a toilet bowl.
So is this Dyson sphere? It's going to be around the sun in 1DQ, right?
I hope so, because if it's not around the sun, then it's not really a Dyson sphere. But we'll see what GSOL decides to do.
It's up to Tuzzy, actually.
1DQ1's Keepstar, but we'll see.
Tuzzy usually watches the show. I was hoping he'd comment, but he hasn't.
Oh.
Yeah,
all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate having a panel of FCs here to be able to talk about the war and get the perspective from the Legacy Coalition. This war has been fantastic working with you guys, and I really look forward to doing bad things to our mutual enemies in the future.
Oh yes.
Happy VE Day.
VE Day.
That's beautiful. As we are about to leave, though, don't forget Vegas is coming up. We are trying to do a meta show there because Mittens and I will both be there. We're going to try to sort this out. I'm testing out my connection and streaming and all that. But yes, thank you, everyone. Oh, hey, Tuzzy's here. Hi, Tuzzy. Yeah.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for subscribing, and we will catch you all next week.
Yep, see you next week. Bye.
You are about to receive messages that may be harmful to your mental state. Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the meta. The meta controls everything. The meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching the Meta Show.